Hello, my name is Gary Mansfield, and this is the Ministry of Arts podcast, where each week I'll be speaking to a different artist. Now let's begin by bagging these bongos.
Yeah, right. Crazy.
Hello, and welcome to episode 225 of the Ministry of Arts podcast. Before I introduce you to this week's guest, let me just play you this little recording. For the third consecutive year, we've partnered with the Kensington and Chelsea Art Week and Art Trail, where we get the opportunity to speak to several of their featured artists. And today's episode is one of those. But before I take you to meet them, let me just give you a little bit of information about the Kensington and Chelsea Art Week and Art Trail. The Art Week is, well, it's just a little bit longer than a week. It runs from the 22nd of June until the 2nd of July. And the Art Trail runs from the 16th of June right up until the end of August. And the Art Trail even has its own art bus. It stops in a location of various artworks and you can jump on and jump off at your heart's content. For the full list of featured artists and a whole lot more information, go over to the Kensington and Chelsea Art Week Instagram page, which is KCAW London, and you'll find everything there that you need. Well, today's guest is Misha Milovanovich. Misha is a multidisciplinary artist that I predominantly know for her sculpture, but I am very well aware that she creates paintings to put these sculptures into. Misha, as a person, is very positive and spiritual, so this episode has got a very relaxed feel. And I don't want to give too much away about this episode, so I'll take you straight into it. So please come and join me as I spoke remotely to Misha Milovanovich. How did you find Art Basel?
I go almost every year if I can, like minus the pandemic times. It is beautiful because it affords me to recharge my batteries and brush up on some of the history of art, see some of the things that probably if they get sold, they go straight to the vaults and you never see them again. Yeah. There are so many things from our art history that I absolutely love. It's one of the reasons, like what for art for me gave me was, I think almost everything, but the sense of freedom, sense of reinvention. And you get to see some of those artists on the stands, on the booths. The booths are beyond kind of high-end, well-curated, all that kind of stuff. There's a bit of networking for sure going on, and I genuinely just love people, so I love engaging. And you have sort of perhaps had too many events and too many, in a way it's a celebration of art. But I've noticed, Gary, I have to share this with you, I've noticed since like I didn't go there for 3 years during the pandemic and last year I just didn't feel it. Yeah. But there is definitely, I mean, art is still beautiful, the level of the work that was brought to the museums as well. More female artists, which is fantastic, more artists of diaspora and color, which is all fantastic. But I've also noticed at the fair, there's a bigger gap between 0.1% to the rest. Yeah. And something I didn't really notice before, and I don't know what it is, sort of had this scent in the air. There was a tiny bit of snobism, which I never saw before or felt. And I just, speaking to a couple of friends, we maybe have come to the conclusion that the world has indeed changed and, needs some readjustment. But overall, just one big massive, wow, what a privilege, so much gratitude.
Well, I've never been. I've seen loads of friends have been. I've seen photographs and whatnot. It does look amazing. But what you were saying there about you noticed the change, do you think it could be that you have changed a little during lockdown? Like so many people have had a different perspective on life. It was quite a leveling experience because for once we was all treated exactly the same. Unless you're a Conservative Party member, of course. But other than that, everyone was on a level playing field, rich, poor, or indifferent, you know? So it could have possibly given some people a different outlook on life. Or he was completely right and there was a bit more of a void this year.
I am not sure. Like, I definitely know that I have changed. I also know because I had time to like grow vegetables. I moved my studio to the countryside where I had more space. Due to some personal circumstances, I also decided to sort of weather it out with this group of friends who were in the countryside. So, and I've also discovered things that I didn't have time for before because I live for my work. So there's a lot of busyness and slight tension in sort of balancing the real life, paying the bills also. So it was a moment where I could relax, focus solely on work, develop the work truly, you know, starting from the core, but also going into some of my trauma, which I've sort of collected as a child or in a childhood due to the personal circumstances of being brought up in the country that then got engulfed in a war. And all that was a kind of zipped up, you know, like a existence that started to open up. So from my personal perspective, I feel I'm more open to the vulnerabilities of people in the world and much more present in a way, and less comparing and despairing, less sort of in a place of balance. And going there, it was really interesting to, you know, to pick these things up from whoever was at the fair. And they're just people, I think. They're no better than me. They might just have a bit more money at this moment in time, but it doesn't make them in any way better or worse. So, you know, it's really interesting, Gary, because I always think like there is art and then there is commerce and there's sort of like a dysfunctional marriage. One is very beautiful, alluring, fun, interesting to talk to, slightly troubled perhaps. And then the other one has money. And what I've discovered during the pandemic, and that's really seeped into my work, is deeper sense of belonging to everything. So on some level, you can say it's a spirituality. And that word I have to be really careful with because it's, you know, it can be misused as well.
Yeah. I mean, we was talking about the lockdowns and during pandemic, where people were taken out, or most people were taken out of their humdrum of daily life. They had more time to think. And that sort of time isn't time that a lot of people had during their life because they've been so busy living their life. When you have that time to sort of step back, think, calculate, so many people gave up work or at least scaled down their work to participate in the arts or creativity even, because they saw how fresh that was and how much of an input that could have on their life.
Definitely, absolutely. I remember, you know, just to kind of bounce off what you were saying, I remember this article in Guardian some years ago, and I think it was written by, or it was led by Jarvis Cocker, who explained this difference between when he was an art student going to, you know, being helped by the government to, like being an adult, being able to get some startup money, so to speak, to really develop that, which then goes and feeds the economy. I mean, look at how much money people like Damien Hirst puts through the coffers. That surely is worth investing into. Yeah. And this is what, you know, Lee, who you know very well, and I totally agree on, you know, with the charity that you guys are involved with. You got to give that opportunity to people to have to find their deeper self and to develop it. So yeah, from that point of view, I think, as you said, time spent creating is such a precious time, really.
Yeah. You mentioned that your work has at least one foundation in childhood trauma. of growing up. Where was it you grew up?
So I was born and raised in Serbia, which at that time was a different country. It was called Yugoslavia, and it was a sort of kind of socialism slash communism system, which had in itself a lot of very positive aspects and some not so positive aspects. So yeah, that's where I came from, to this totally opposite type of life and living, to the kind of high octane capitalism of the West. So yeah, I, in my journey, hold these two quite opposite polarities of existence, and I guess who am I as a person to implement both of these ways of life.
And was you still there when it started to change?
No, I came here. I was a student, so I came to
Okay.
study, and then things started to change, and I found myself having to make a decision. What do I do next? So I was like, let's see how this pans up. And here I am still trying to figure out what would be the best thing to do.
Well, did you have creativity in the home growing up, Misha?
Oh, definitely. So it wasn't perceived to be art whatsoever. So my dad's an engineer, technical stuff like mathematics, sciences, all this sort of stuff, very linear, very like male. But as a young boy, he was taught all these different disciplines, like to be a carpenter, to be an electrician, plumber. So in my home, and my mum's a crafts master, she sort of embroiders and sews and stuff like that. But it was never, everything was implemented into day-to-day life. It wasn't ever seen as a high art. So the fact that my dad made all our furniture, it just meant that he could do that. It wasn't perceived as a cool thing, because in the times I was growing up, there were not that many nice things in the shops.
Yeah.
And everybody was really capable of making things. So even my clothes was made by mom and I at the age of 10, because I didn't like what you can buy in the shop. So brilliant. I started designing. And that's really, I guess, how my journey began, through almost the necessity to create something more beautiful, more pleasant, more interesting, without really knowing that was design or that was art. That makes sense.
What a perfect introduction, though, right?
I know. Yeah.
And when was it you decided you wanted to be an artist?
So I was originally a filmmaker and a film student. And when my grant stopped, I had some time to figure out what to do. And I started to make these drawings totally by, they were like almost like a visions I had to draw. And somebody saw them, recommended that I had a short career in storyboarding for commercial companies and advertising type of clients. Because in the movies, when you do movies, in old days, you used to storyboard your visions, your images, how you wanted your stories to be. And that's how I started. And it developed from there. I absolutely had no idea. I had an idea to be more of a filmmaker, to include all arts together as all the elements like music and scenography and costumes. And it was a total surprise to me that I actually began drawing and painting. And it just exploded. It was like the seed was planted somewhere. I don't know where. Maybe by reading too many things and watching too many things. And that's what I believe, Gary, that every single person we meet, every single conversation, everything is like a tapestry of our lives.
Yeah.
And it takes us to the journey we're meant to have in order to maybe be better people and to pass that on to somebody else. So, by you telling me your story and finding yourself in a prison, which cannot be a nice place or nice circumstances in life, somebody came to you and sort of almost like led you into direction to discover things about yourself. And so, we continue this magic of life And I feel that art is virtually absolutely everywhere. So I'll give you like an example. When you open my cupboards, somebody said, oh, you stuck them like sculptures. So things are never like ordered. They're ordered in a way that I feel that I need them to flow somehow. And sometimes a cup could be on top of each other with a little bit of color that I put on a side as a card or something that it's like, I truly believe that in a way, life is, art is how you live your life, really. Yeah. And maybe just sculptures are expression of that, like a final expression, but it's in everything. It's how you read people, how, you know, everything. Like I try to talk to people like their work in Tesco's and my local, you know, supermarket, because I believe that that interaction is valuable for both of us, and therefore I might put that into my work. It's a very strange thing. I can't quite explain it perfectly, but I feel it.
It's that feeling that you're putting into it, a little bit of energy from different people and influences that you come across.
Totally. And then everything becomes like a form of eulogy, but also inspiration. And it's so important, you know, maybe a thought that a Greek philosopher had has an impact on a 21st century young student. And you don't really need to quote it. But when you hear that say Aristotle thought in a way that your journey actually matters more than what the end product is,
yeah,
it makes total sense. And then you start to actually see how everything's connected, almost like in a nature. There are layers that we don't see, but they also make the growth of nature happen. And then as everything kind of reduces itself and becomes more quiet and sleepy, it needs, you know, it's almost like it needs to go into that phase of hibernation in order for the ground to be made for something new to grow. So from that perspective, it becomes almost like a philosophy of life, which means that everything is okay, you know, even the kind of hard things are. When you were in prison, I would like to ask you, how did you feel about going to these art classes? What that made you feel?
Well, first of all, they just started off as a means to get out of the cell. And then I discovered the more I put into this newfound thing, which I hadn't yet fallen in love with, I got that back. My environment started to cross over into this aesthetic world. You know, that takes some time to get used to, but yeah, many years later, that's how I live my life physically and mentally now.
That is so beautiful. And in a way, your tutor, what it sounds like, was like opening the doors to that portal, and you were
definitely
invited by the muse. And that muse could be, you know, historically seen in so many different guises. But, you know, you took the leap of faith and discovered something incredibly magical that will sustain you probably for the rest of your life in that spiritual realm, in the mental, intellectual, and so on and so forth. So it sounds absolutely amazing. Love it. Love it.
He was a good guy. And you've mentioned your work a few times, Misha. How would you describe your work to someone that may not know it?
Joy and I think if I had an elevator pitch with, I don't know, say Andy Warhol, and I, you know, I got like 10 minutes or 5 minutes, or I'm guessing that's what you're asking me.
It would have to be 15 with Andy Warhol, wouldn't it?
Oh, yeah, exactly. Unless he's had enough of the 15 and he's taking it down to 5. He's like, okay, the world has changed. I'm going to be 5 with everybody because, you know, 15 is a long time now. So I think what I am, I think I really take my personal life experience and try to turn it into something. So like I take these fragments from my life, either they're psychological, emotional, or visual. Like some of those shapes in my sculptures are from nature, like the clouds or petals or dolphins, but they're very abstracted. But then also I might take an experience that wasn't particularly nice or wholesome or holistic, like the war back home, like the fact that I had a breakdown of a marriage, that I was a single mom, and all those difficulties might become shapes. And then I create these almost like totem-like trees that I'm hoping will inspire people for their own growth, and also on some intellectual formalistic level. They're like trees of my own living experience. But this is really interesting, Gary, and thank you for asking, because I have to think about this. For me, it's all work in progress, and it can never like be pinned down too much, if that makes sense. Because I will find, and I do textiles, and I will sew with my mom. It's like everything becomes then a collaboration and inspiration, and each aspect of the way, it could be a drawing, could be a tapestry or a ceramic piece or a metal piece, it's done within the realm of working with other people. So it's the conversations that I'm interested in and what they bring to it. And even though sometimes with like metal, you can't really change your mind, it doesn't work that way because people need to weld it. It's really all about experimenting and pushing the work and finding something that it's almost like it comes from my subconscious mind into the consciousness. And I really love being simple to myself about it, and maybe even using intuition when I work. Like, I absolutely love the work of Jean Arp, who's a sculptor.
Yeah.
He's a big hero of mine, and he had this philosophy that when he was drawing his shapes, he didn't want his ego to get in a way, so he did things like automatically. And I love this idea of working with your intuition, which you can't really pin it down. So therefore, at the moment, at this point in a historical kind of, when you look at art history, it's slightly avoided, but I think there will be a time for this kind of chapter where spiritual work or spirituality or emotions or feelings that are not really trendy, like joy and happiness, are also brought to the forefront, because we don't talk about this healing aspect of art enough.
Yeah. I was about to say your sculptures are very calming to look at. They are organic shapes. They're very soft and subtle. The only angle is when they interlock, normally at roughly a 90-degree angle. So for anyone listening, it might be like a flat cloud or two flat clouds that you have sculpted, and that one is turned 90 degrees and interlink into the other. So it gives it more of a form from different angles. And they are very soft, they're very calming. And when we also talk about your paintings, it's almost as if you're making a world for these figures to go and live in.
Yeah, no, that's so wonderful. You just made, okay, so there is one thing that I thought the other day, and I was like, that's going to sound really weird. Like, can you be a vibe sculpture? Can you work with like vibes around you and then turn them into sculptures? Like, and I've noticed that you can do that with a sound, but it's not that common. I need to show you something. Just stay there 2 seconds. Excuse me, Gary.
You're all right.
So I've been doing more and more carving. So this is from, not many people have seen this. This is like an experiment. Okay. It's so I made body of work, which is all very voluminous and carved, and it's made in fiberglass. But this little piece, it's an experimenting piece that I sort of painted just as a test. So I'm moving much more towards, I love the way you said, like, the clouds that are kind of fitted together in organic forms of nature. The work is taking me into the more of a fullness of the form, and sort of playing with this idea of growth and volumizing things and actually carving them, because so far the shapes were made exactly by interlocking, which I have taken from one of my favorite artists, Isamu Noguchi, who does a lot of beautiful, just like, this is the first time actually that I've experienced crying in an exhibition at the Barbican a couple of years ago. I was like, what is going on? Why am I crying? This, I've never experienced that. And I cried like 3 times. I was like, this is really weird. Has that happened to you before?
3 times.
Where?
I had Damien Hirst, who is someone that doesn't normally, his work doesn't normally affect me. But during his, I think it was a retrospective at the Tate several years ago, he had a butterfly room. And me and a friend was coming out of there, and my friend had one of the actual living butterflies on his collar. So just as we come out, I cupped the butterfly to leave it in the room we just come out of. And as I turned around, there was Damien Hirst's butterfly windows, you know, the
stainless steel
glass windows,
yeah.
It made of butterflies. That was up in the air. My eyes just welled up, and the other 2 were Francis Bacon paintings.
Amazing. Do you know what was the emotion that came into you?
It was just seeing this vast array of beauty. There was this huge mass of colour beaming down on me. It took my breath away, and whatever it was inside, you know, culminated in making my eyes water and a tear run down my face.
Totally relate to it. I mean, when I remember that feeling of seeing these works by Noguchi, this amazing, beautifully curated exhibition at the Barbican, I was overwhelmed by the notion of how somebody can put this together in such a succinct way, such a very gloriously simple way, and that there lived a remarkable human being who sort of traveled through the time, gathered all this, and was able to express it. And, you know, here it is for me to come to it, feel it. And you see, this is the thing when things are so powerful with the beauty that there are no words to describe them.
They have their own meaning.
They kind of live in their own realm and world, and you can just feel it. And maybe that's the best thing about it. As soon as I try to describe it, I turn into gibbering idiot, which is fine. I'm okay
No,
with
that's
that.
good. It is just a connection you have with something in that instant. Sometimes it doesn't need describing. It is just in the moment. It is just that emotional connection we have with that, either what we've seen, what we've heard, or which piece that you've created do you think has got the strongest emotional connection?
Let me think. From all the sculptures, and they're difficult to divide or make divisions in my mind, because for me it's always about what's coming next. How do I communicate better? And so these new carved works are that's where my mind is at, you know. Works that have a lot of texturing, different finishes, maybe using some minerals and salts to accentuate this like skin-like finish almost. So things like that is what really keeps me up late at night or gets me out of bed in the morning.
Well, you just made reference to the sculptures that you're looking at creating next. And you mentioned carving. Would I be correct in thinking that they're out of wood then?
There are some pieces that are made of wood. So I've been working with this like 500-year-old yew trees, and also finding people that can source them. And it's like this like wonderful, great little wood yards in near Wales. And I spend quite a bit of time in Shropshire, where I have my welding studio and so on. Yeah, carving in wood, also making things in DUP boards, which is like you can carve them, make surfboards from. So you stick them together with glue and make them really kind of big shapes, and then you start to carve them. Using different techniques, learning with resin, learning how to use resin. I was not I didn't study sculpting. I studied actually painting. I'm a painter. When I came into art, I was more inclined to understand two-dimensionality and create three-dimensionality. And then again, art has afforded me this journey to experiment and to see some stuff that will come from the paintings into 3D, maybe cutting wood and layering. And so that's how the sculptures began. And then when I started to walk that path, I thought, oh, well, let's try this and let's try that. So it's a wonderful road into learning and acquiring these skills around how to make sculptures, and also finding out that it is prohibitively expensive to make sculptures.
Very much so. Very much so. If there was you and 5 other artists, Misha, past or present, what would your ideal group show be?
Oh my God, thank you for asking me that. So it would be Jeanne Arp, Noguchi. I would have to put a couple of female artists just for the kind of balance of history. So it would have to be, I love Louise Bourgeois. I love her irreverent, sort of punk-like persona. I think I would have Niki Destanfal, because we're looking for one more woman. She was just wonderful on so many levels for me. And there was that playfulness about her and so much beauty. And then I would also take, I have to take Basquiat in just because.
Good choice.
Unfortunately, it's gone totally kind of commercially mainstream, but there is a reason why his work is so freeing and so happy, and so I don't know. There is an element of freedom that I get, and I'm sure a lot of people get through just viewing his work. So I'm going to take Basquiat because it would have been also nice to. Okay, can I share that with Keith Haring and Basquiat together?
Perfect.
So they will have to come together.
They're a good team to create.
Sorry about that.
I'm about to ask if you've got anything coming up, but I know one thing you have got coming up, which is your position in the Kensington and Chelsea Art Week and Art Trail. Would you be able to tell us a little bit more on what you've got going on there?
So I have a beautiful, massive, it's not massive, actually it's started to look small to me when I saw it. It was massive inside of my studio because it's like 2 meters big, but now that is on the street, it just shows you the sort of scale, how it changes when you have, environment, when the environment changes around it. So I have a pink metal steel sculpture, which is made out of 8 individual pieces, welded and powder coated for the KCW Art Trail, and it represents many things, but this one is particularly based around the empress, the goddess, the female form, and fertility is part of it. So it sort of represents the beauty of women and the power of women, and he celebrates it. So that's kind of short version.
And whereabouts can it be found?
So it's on the High Street, Ken, in between Design Museum and Olympia. It's on that little stretch. So if people are happy to have a little mooch around on a sunny afternoon this summer, they'll be able to find it and hopefully get a lot of joy from it. And I would love to, Gary, invite you. I have an exhibition in town at the moment at the gallery in Daring Street. Please come. It's on until September. I'd love you to come. There are some works in steel and multicolored, which is very technically hard to do. And there are some pieces in wood and mixed media that I've also been working on. So I would love you to come and see that. Kensington Chelsea Trail, first time. It's been fun. It's been a bit hectic because I also have this exhibition in London at the Muchacha Gallery on 21 Daring Street. So it's just been.
And how do you feel, Misha? Is there a different feeling that you get with your art being a sculpture inside and a sculpture outside? You've just mentioned that it looks so much smaller outside compared to when it was in your studio. So there is a different feeling you would get as an artist and the viewer would get seeing a piece of public artwork compared to private, as it were, in a gallery.
Totally. And this has taught me a huge lesson in a way, and huge experience just to see it. I've seen some of my sculptures before in nature, in a private garden type of scenarios, like clients that, commission them. But time is much more urban environment. There's so many things that I have no control over in any way, shape, or form. First of all, where this piece is going to go. I'm not going to turn around and say, oh, I don't want my piece there. I need it to be there. I'm not going to be that kind of artist. Even though secretly I would love to. But, we'll slowly get there. The diva needs to kind of be locked in a cupboard for maybe another couple of decades. But joke aside, it's really one of the things when they picked up the sculpture was like, I don't know if I can't bear this. It's gone, and will it be okay? Will somebody scratch it?
Like handing your baby over to someone
totally.
else.
I was kind of bereaved for about like 2 days. It's very strange, but that happens when anything goes. Even when I do an exhibition, and when things come back, even though I need them to sell, I'm like, yes, you're back from here. Oh, I love you. You'll never leave me again. Yeah, saying goodbye to something, it's tough, as you know. How do you feel when things leave your studio?
There was a time when I didn't even sell anything, keeping the drawings and only selling the prints.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So now I have a lot of original drawings. I've just come round to the fact that they need to sell. But yeah, I had that conflict. Too much of a personal connection, but I was fine when it was a commission because there's that disconnect.
Oh, so Damien's mom told me once, awesome Mary, she's a super awesome person and a great friend, and I see her sometimes with other friends when she's in London, and she said to me that the reason why Damien was successful is one time somebody came who wanted to, well, she didn't say exactly that's the reason, but things changed where when he doubled the prices. And I think there is something about the merit of playing the game of success and how people value the work. So the value of work is a very interesting question. So going back to the beginning when you were asking me, how did I find Art Basel? That's part of it. Finding out how this aspect of this entity of value has an impact on me. And in the past, I used to be intimidated by this kind of expensive work around me. And now I'm like, let me tap into this energy. Let me vibrate a little bit closer to where these works are, because I've noticed when I started to change my mindset and really work from the place of trust, belief, and handing it over, things started to change for me. And of course, I think that's generally focused with everything else, that I was producing more work, being more serious about the finishes, creating work with a really kind of expensive materials such as steel and welding, and hiring people to do it. So it's, this question of value and how we value ourselves is not something we had taught in art school. And I think as an artist, we need to have more support for each other and more discussions about it as well.
Yeah. Well, speaking about the value of art, be it financial value or emotional value, I had a friend contact me who's, I wouldn't say wealthy, but he's got money to spare, He wanted to buy a piece of artwork. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, do you want it for your heart or for your pocket? Mm-hmm. And he said, well, he wanted it as a piece, like an investment. And I said, well, I can't help you, because every bit of artwork that I've got, I've bought because it's connected with me. So it doesn't bother me if it was £5 or if it was £5,000.
I love that,
Gary. It means a different amount to me,
I love that. And I totally agree, because there was a period where I was an art curator and advisor. I was a single mom. So, I did jobs to, keep a roof over our heads and put food on the table. And I remember being around these people who were talking absolute nonsense. And advising on what you should be buying for the investment, and sitting there thinking, okay, I've got to keep my mouth shut because I really need to, keep this work, is paying the bill, but you know nothing, and you're actually talking total, utter rubbish, because it's so highly speculative that that these bubbles are created by so-and-so advisors talking about it and building the hype around it. They bring a client in, they convince them, the client brings a couple of his mates, and there you go. There's a bubble created, or the value of the work goes higher. But it's total and utter rubbish. I would just say, buy what you love and you will never go wrong with it. That's really it.
And for people who can't see your work in person, how would they see what you're doing, be it website or social media?
Yeah, please just drop onto my website. I will update it shortly because it's been a little bit of a busy time, so it will be updated very soon. But generally, Instagram, I love making reels that with absolute great gusto, where I create just really fun, funky narratives.
And what is the title of both your website and social media?
It's my name and my surname, which is Misha, first name, second name Milovanovich. And that is purely Serbian name in both cases. And I will spell that. That's M-I-S-H-A. And then Milovanovich, that's M for mother, I for Italy, L for love, O for October, V for victory, A for apple, N for November, O for October again, V for victory, I for Italy, and C for chocolate, and H for happy. I am so sorry. It's a very long surname. Milovanovich.
And it is a little bit of a tongue twister for us that may not use those on a regular basis.
You know what? I thought about changing, and then I was like, you cannot do that. My ancestors will be really upset. So I have to just continue being a very long surname person.
Okay, Misha, thank you very much for your time. It's very much appreciated.
Thank you, Gary.
And I will definitely pass through Kensington High Street to see your work there. And while I'm there, I will pop over at Dering Street, that's for sure.
Thank you, Gary. Please come to Dering Street and just send me a text or an email. I'll drop you my number and we'll have a coffee as well.
Definitely.
Bye.
See you later. Bye-bye.
Hello, I'm Vestolia Chilton, the director of Kensington and Chelsea Art Week and Art Trail. You've just been listening to one of our featured artists. Make sure to keep these dates, for the Art Trail starts on the 15th of June and lasts all summer, and Art Week starts on the 22nd of June and ends on the 2nd of July. All of this information is on our website, kcaw.co.uk. We look forward to welcoming you.
Well, hope you enjoyed that episode of the Ministry of Arts podcast. So we wasn't dictated to by advertisers, we decided from the offset to go ad-free, which means obviously we had to self-fund. So we set up the Ministry of Arts Patreon page. And without that support, we would not be able to produce this podcast. So if you like what you hear and you're able to support the podcast, just go over to the Ministry of Arts Instagram profile. You'll find a Linktree drop-down box, which will direct you straight to our Patreon page. And for the price of a cup of coffee, you can help keep us growing week by week. But if you're not able to do that, that's fine, because this content is free for everyone. But leaving a review on whichever platform you listen to your podcast, that really does help us get noticed and anyone else looking for an art podcast. Or even giving us a positive shout out on your social media. Everything is appreciated. But either way, thanks for listening, and until next week, ta-da.